Hello, Namaskar. This is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. The war in West Asia has taken a new turn. Israel attacked Iran, but before firing the missiles, it apparently sent warnings with details of what it would strike. In response, Iran is making the right noises and showing outrage, but not talking about retaliation. Does this mean both sides are working towards wrapping this up? And if yes, then why is Netanyahu planning to fire his defense minister who wants to end the war? We'll break it down for you. In India, the Spanish Prime Minister is visiting, the first one in 18 years, and the focus is on defense ties. We will look at this relationship and tell you why Pedro Sanchez is a good partner to have in Europe. In the US, Washington Post is under fire. For the first time in decades, they won't endorse a presidential candidate. Did owner Jeff Bezos strike a secret deal with Donald Trump? And why do American newspapers endorse candidates? How does it impact the election? We'll discuss all of that. Japan's election has thrown up a hung parliament. What happens next? Why Ukrainian President Zelensky says Prime Minister Modi can help end the war. How Pakistan is hunting for more loans. Why Hindus are rallying in Bangladesh. Why Russia is being accused of interference in the Georgia election. And why gambling is being called a global public health threat. We bring you the findings of a new report. All this and more coming up. The headlines first. In India, terrorists attack an army vehicle in Jammu and Kashmir's Akhnur. At least 3 assailants killed in the gunfight. Security forces launch a large-scale operation to nab the terrorists who fled the scene. Since last week, Jammu and Kashmir has seen a series of terror attacks. A dispute over Chinese flags in Malaysia sparks backlash. Tension started over the display of Chinese flags at a festival in Malaysia's Perak state. This led to an outcry, with people gathering to unfurl Malaysia's flag and sing the national anthem. But Kuala Lumpur cautions its citizens, saying tensions could impact tourism. Boko Haram attacks Chad's army near the Nigerian border, killing around 40 soldiers in the overnight attack. The Boko Haram insurgency erupted in northeast Nigeria in 2009. Since then, it has killed more than 300,000 people and forced millions to flee their homes. Japan's Mount Fuji remains snowless. It's the latest date that the slopes have been bare since records began 130 years ago. Usually, the volcano's snow cap begins forming by early October. Japan's summer this year was its joint hottest on record, equaling last year. And Afghanistan's morality ministry is introducing a new ban. It's on images of living beings, including animals, in the media. Taliban officials have already started barring photography and filming. Only pictures of buildings, landscapes, and audio recordings will be permitted.
We hit hard Iran's defense capabilities and its ability to produce missiles that are aimed at us.
We start with West Asia, where weekends tend to be a busy affair. Beyond the bombings, which have unfortunately become par for the course, this time we saw Israel striking Iran. Yes, it's finally happened. After weeks of planning, Netanyahu and team finally attacked Iran. They called the airstrikes precise and targeted. It was retaliation. Earlier this month, Tehran had rained some 200 missiles on Israel. So this Friday, Israel fired back, although not on the same scale. It struck some 20 targets in Iran. And in the run-up to this, there was a lot of speculation. Would Israel attack Iran's nuclear and oil facilities? Some hawks in Israel certainly wanted to, but Netanyahu seems to have given in to American pressure. He opted for a limited operation, firing at Iran's defense system, its drone bases and weapons production facilities, specifically the missile and drone units around Tehran. Let's show you some pictures. This is one of the sites that the Israelis hit. Apparently, Iran had built this to test nuclear weapons. The IDF attacked it with jets and drones, and Netanyahu says, mission accomplished. He says Israel has achieved all of its goals.
The attack in Iran was precise and powerful and achieved all of its objectives.
4 Iranian soldiers were killed in this attack, and Tehran has vowed to avenge their death. Iran's president said they would give a quote-unquote appropriate response. At the same time, he said Iran does not want a war, and his statements have been measured and guarded. It's like both sides are going through the motions, Iran and Israel. They don't want to be seen as weak, but they want to avoid an escalation. Look at this report. It says that Israel gave a heads up to Iran before the strikes. It sent several messages to Tehran, which were delivered by intermediaries. Through these messages, Israel told Iran that it was planning to strike. It also outlined the targets and shared details like which sites will come under attack and which ones will be avoided. But why would Israel do this? To minimize damage on the Iranian side so that they don't feel compelled to launch a counterattack. Basically, Israel tried telling Iran, let this be the last attack. Unless you escalate from here, we won't strike again. But if you strike back, if you harm Israeli citizens, then the IDF will come back with greater force. Of course, Israel has neither confirmed nor denied any of these reports. These two countries, remember, are sworn enemies. They have no diplomatic relations. Iran does not even recognize the state of Israel. So officially, Israel would never confirm giving a tip-off to the Iranians before an attack. But it does make sense, this strategy, this approach gives two messages. One, Israel doesn't want an escalation from here. And two, it has also demonstrated its capabilities. It has shown Iran its reach, how its jets can breach the Iranian airspace and strike targets with pinpoint accuracy. And the message has reached the intended recipients. Iran's supreme leader said the attack should neither be exaggerated nor downplayed. More importantly, he did not call for retaliation.
Well, they made a mistake. They, of course, exaggerated it. Their exaggeration is wrong, but note that downplaying it is also wrong. Saying, no, there was nothing, it wasn't important, and this is also wrong.
So just the standard rhetoric from Tehran. From the looks of it, this may not escalate. And even if it did, it would not be the biggest challenge on Netanyahu's list. He is under immense pressure at home. His allies want him to take a ceasefire deal now. So far, the Israeli Prime Minister has ignored such calls, but it's getting harder by the day, given that his own defense minister is now challenging him. We are talking about Yoav Gallant. He has written a letter to Prime Minister Netanyahu criticizing the war. He says Israel's war efforts have become aimless. We have a copy and a quote from that letter. This is what it says. Significant developments in the war, especially Israel and Iran trading direct blows, raise the necessity of holding a discussion and updating the war's goals with a comprehensive look. So Gallant is calling for a reassessment, but Netanyahu may not agree. Instead, he is looking to fire Gallant. That's what the Israeli press is reporting, that the Prime Minister wants to sack the defense minister. Meanwhile, public pressure is piling on. Over the weekend, Netanyahu was heckled by protesters. Reports say these were families of the hostages who are still in Gaza. They want a ceasefire so that their people can be brought back. Earlier, Egypt had proposed a new deal. Egypt is mediating between Israel and Hamas. It proposed a 2-day ceasefire in exchange for the release of 4 hostages. Netanyahu is said to have rejected that proposal. He doesn't want an end to the war, neither in Gaza nor in Lebanon, it seems. And in this scenario, the chances of an escalation with Iran and the risk of a wider war in West Asia will remain alive.
प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी ऑस्ट्रेलिया के प्रधानमंत्री के देश संचेत संयुक्त रूप से उद्घाटन करेंगे जो C295 विमान
The Spanish Prime Minister is in India. It's a country we don't talk about too often, not unless it's La Liga football or maybe over tourism. But this time it's hard politics. Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez landed in India earlier today. Not in New Delhi though. He landed in Gujarat's Vadodara. It's his first trip to India as Prime Minister, also the first by a Spanish Prime Minister in 18 years. It tells you a lot about this relationship. Cordial, but nothing special. Hopefully this visit will add a bit of momentum. But why Vadodara? Because Sanchez and Prime Minister Narendra Modi had to inaugurate a factory there, the Tata Airbus aircraft plant. It is India's first such private assembly line. The production, the testing, the delivery, the repairs, all of it will be done in Vadodara, in the same Tata campus. Sort of like a one-stop location for the aircraft. And what's the connection to Spain? Well, the aircraft is called the C-295. It used to be manufactured by a Spanish defense company, but it later merged into Airbus. India has ordered 56 of these planes. 16 will be delivered from Spain. The remaining 40 will be made here in Vadodara. It's a big deal for the Indian Air Force. These planes can play multiple roles. They can carry troops, they can ferry cargo, carry out evacuations, and also the odd patrolling missions. They will replace India's aging fleet of Soviet Antonovs. The first C-295 will roll out by 2026. The remaining by 2031. It's all part of the Make in India vision for defense. New Delhi has historically been a buyer in the arms market. But Prime Minister Modi wants to change that. He wants India to become a seller. He highlighted the progress made in the last decade.
भारत में डिफेंस मैन्युफैक्चरिंग इकोसिस्टम नई ऊंचाइयां छू रहा है। 10 साल पहले अगर हमने ठोस कदम नहीं उठाए होते तो आज इस मंजिल पर पहुंचना असंभव ही था।
This factory is a big first step. It will create around 3,000 direct jobs. Plus, it will create a supply chain. As you know, an aircraft requires hundreds of parts and electronics. The plan is to source them from across India, from MSMEs or medium and small enterprises. That will create another 15,000 indirect jobs. So we're talking about an ambitious plan. Once this military order is done, the factory can always make other planes, maybe even civilian aircraft. After the inauguration, the focus turned to diplomacy. Prime Minister Modi and Sanchez held a road show. Hundreds of people turned up to greet the two leaders. Take a look at this. Roadshow done, it was time for talks. Prime Minister Modi hosted Sanchez at the Lakshmi Vilas Palace. Both leaders were joined by quite a large delegation. The Indian Prime Minister talked about deepening bilateral ties. Prime Minister Sanchez noted India's importance in the current geopolitical climate. This is what he said.
Excellency, buenos dias. नमस्कार। उसी प्रकार आपकी इस यात्रा से हमारे संबंधों में एक नई ऊर्जा और उत्साह का संचार हुआ है। आज C-295 प्लांट के उद्घाटन के साथ साझेदारी के एक नए अध्याय की शुरुआत भी हुई है।
I am certain that this visit will strengthen our bilateral relations and will honor the weight and influence that both India and Spain have in the world. Complement each other. India plays a prominent role not only in the Indo-Pacific but also in the wider geopolitical context.
Modi and Sanchez have a tough job to turn this relationship into a consequential one. Bilateral trade is around $10 billion. Spain makes up 7% of India's trade with Europe. Robust, but not extraordinary. So what is Pedro Sanchez hoping to achieve in India? Maybe more options. You see, Sanchez has invested a lot in his relationship with China. He visited China twice in the last 18 months, even tried to delay EU tariffs on Chinese vehicles. But other European Union members do not agree with this approach, so they are tightening the screws on Beijing, which is perhaps why he's turning to India. And for New Delhi, Pedro Sanchez is a key ally to have. Spain is the fastest growing major economy in Europe, plus Sanchez is emerging as a force. He has defied the EU on a number of issues. Whether it's giving tanks to Ukraine or opposing Israel or reaching out to China, Sanchez is carving out his own place in the bloc. And he can afford to do that. The likes of Macron and Olaf Scholz are facing domestic setbacks. But Pedro Sanchez is better placed at home. He's also flaunting Spain's historical ties to other parts of the world, like North Africa and Latin America, something that he did in India too.
Spain maintains privileged relations with Latin America, historic ties in the Middle East, increased presence in Africa, and is a leading voice in the European Union. This geopolitical framework offers many opportunities for our countries to reach different regions and develop closer and more productive relations.
So Spain is a good ally to have in Brussels, whether it's for free trade talks or defense deals or Indo-Pacific partnerships. It also tells you about India's long-term plans for Europe. Earlier, the engagement was limited to a few states, maybe France or Germany, but now it's much wider. This year, Prime Minister Modi visited Poland and Austria, and now the Spanish Prime Minister is visiting. So the plan is to build closer ties across the bloc. Of course, the strategy varies. With Germany, India is offering its skilled labor force. With Spain, India is offering tourism. With France, India is buying weapons. And with Poland, India is selling weapons. New Delhi realizes that Europe is looking for alternatives to China, both strategic and financial alternatives. So it is India's time to cash in. There's a big debate unfolding in the US. Should newspapers endorse politicians, specifically presidential candidates? Should you endorse presidential candidates as a newspaper? It may sound weird to some of you. You may wonder, shouldn't the media not take sides? But in the US, it is quite common. Ahead of elections, newspapers endorse one of the candidates. Not this time, though. This time, many newspapers are ditching the trend. The latest is a big name in US media, the Washington Post. They have decided to not endorse Kamala Harris or Donald Trump. And it's a big decision for them. The Post has endorsed candidates since the 1970s. The last time they did not was in 1988. That was the only exception since 1970. Back then, the Washington Post called both campaigns a national disappointment. It was George Bush versus Michael Dukakis, a very bitter campaign filled with personal attacks. So the Washington Post said neither candidate is worthy. Other than that, they've always backed someone. So why are they breaking tradition now? The official excuse is that the Post is going back to its roots before the 70s when they did not endorse candidates. That's the official excuse. Unofficially, because their owner said so. That's Amazon founder Jeff Bezos. He bought the Washington Post in 2013, and he doesn't want his newspaper to endorse anyone this time. For the record, the endorsement was ready. The Post was going to back Kamala Harris. They had even prepared a statement. But Jeff Bezos killed it. The obvious question is why? It's not like Trump and Bezos are fans of each other. Amazon sued Donald Trump during his presidency. So why the change of heart now? Perhaps for business. Amazon does a lot of business with the US government. Their space company, Blue Origin, has a contract with NASA, a $3.4 billion deal. On Friday, Blue Origin officials met Trump. The same day, Washington Post announced its decision. And the logic is simple. If Trump wins, he could kill that deal. Or maybe keep Bezos out of future projects. After all, Trump is best buddies with Elon Musk, and Musk has his own space company. Chances are that influenced Jeff Bezos' decision. Most of the Post reporters are not happy with this call. Some of them have decided to quit. Some former journalists have called it a spineless decision. But let's take a step back here. Let's look at this tradition as a whole. When did US media start backing candidates? Why do they do it? And does it make an impact? The tradition itself is quite old. It dates back to the 1800s. Back then, America's media landscape was very different. It was called the party press. Editors would get funding and contracts from political parties. In return, they would endorse candidates, even push their policies and agendas. In the last century, the process became more refined. Editorial boards would get together, they would analyze policies, they would look at pros and cons of both sides, and finally, they would endorse one candidate. That said, it was more about principles and policy. That's what they said. It was more about principles and policy, not about who gave the paper money. But the ideological tilt was quite obvious. Just look at the Washington Post again. They have endorsed only Democrats since the 1970s. Same with the New York Times. They last endorsed a Republican in 1956. Even this time, they're backing Kamala Harris. Now, I know the obvious question. Doesn't this compromise journalistic integrity? You're openly endorsing a candidate. You clearly like their policy. So won't your reportage be biased? These newspapers say no. But let's face it, endorsing a candidate is a partisan act. It betrays your inherent bias. Some newspapers have started realizing that. Just look at these numbers. In 1940, only 13% newspapers did not endorse a candidate. Only 13%. The rest did endorse a candidate. The overwhelming majority endorsed a candidate in a US presidential election. By 1996, it had risen to 70%. So most US newspapers do not endorse a candidate anymore. Only a few are clinging on to this tradition. For example, the Wall Street Journal does not, nor does the USA Today. Which brings us to a final question. Does it sway voters? In the past, yes, it did. I'm talking about a time before social media, before every house had a television. Back then, newspaper endorsements did make a difference. If you look at all the races since the 1940s, more endorsements equaled more chances of winning. But recently that has changed. A, because trust in the media has fallen. Only 31% Americans trust traditional media outlets. So their endorsement is not valuable. In fact, in some cases, it can be counterproductive. And B, because social media is more important these days. People don't need newspapers to tell them what Trump stands for. They can just follow him on X or listen to his speeches on YouTube. Some of the recent elections reflect this trend. In 2004, John Kerry had more newspaper endorsements than George Bush. But Bush won the White House. In 2016, Hillary Clinton had 240 endorsements. Donald Trump had 6. Yet, it was Trump who won the election. And this time, Kamala Harris has 18 newspapers backing her. Trump has just 10. Yet the race is a dead heat. So maybe it's time to retire this tradition for the right reasons, of course. You should stop this practice because it is partisan. It is against the principle of neutrality, not because of fear of retribution. If it's the latter, it sort of defeats the point, doesn't it? So the US presidential campaign has entered its final week. With just 8 days to go, both candidates are leaving no stone unturned. On Sunday, Donald Trump was in New York City trying to make a statement with a mega rally, but it wasn't without some racist rhetoric. Meanwhile, Kamala Harris was in battleground Pennsylvania trying to woo voters by visiting restaurants and drinking some beer. As election day on November 5th looms, 2 new polls show that this will be a very close race. And more than 41 million people have cast an early vote. Our next report tells you more.
It was homecoming for Donald Trump. On Sunday, the former US president held a rally in New York City at Madison Square Garden. New York is where Trump was born. It's where he made his name as a property developer and a media personality. And this is the place he chose to deliver his grand closing pitch for this presidential election.
And now, please welcome our next Commander-in-Chief, my husband, President Donald J. Trump.
Trump was joined by his running mate J.D. Vance, Tesla CEO Elon Musk, billionaire Vivek Ramaswamy, conservative pundit Tucker Carlson, and many other high-profile supporters.
As you can see, I'm not just MAGA, I'm dark, gothic MAGA. Well, the energy in this room is incredible.
I'll tell you something, I don't follow the polls, I don't follow the pundits, but I follow the energy. And this does not feel like second place energy in here tonight.
I don't see no stinking Nazis in here. I don't see no stinking domestic terrorists in here. The only thing I see in here are a bunch of hard-working men and women that are real Americans, brother.
The rally was all about making America great again. Donald Trump played to his base, talking about illegal migration and attacking Kamala Harris.
If Kamala Harris gets 4 more years, our economy can never recover. If I win, we will quickly build the greatest economy in the history of the world. Which is what we had in our last term. We will rapidly defeat inflation, and we will very simply make America affordable again. We're going to make it affordable.
There were some insults and even some racist rhetoric.
It is absolutely wild times. It really, really is. And, you know, there's a lot going on. Like, I don't know if you guys know this, but there's literally a floating island of garbage in the middle of the ocean right now. Yeah. I think it's called Puerto Rico. Okay. All right. Okay.
Puerto Rico is a Caribbean island, also an unincorporated territory of the United States. It is located 1,600 kilometers from the coast of Miami, yet it is center stage in this year's presidential election. Puerto Rico is home to 3.2 million US citizens, and the comments did not go down well with them. But it could become a bigger problem in Pennsylvania. It's a swing state and also home to 580,000 Latino voters. The majority of them are of Puerto Rican descent. So obviously, the Trump campaign tried to distance themselves from the comments. On the other hand, Kamala Harris made a pitch to Puerto Rican voters. From a barber shop to a Puerto Rican restaurant, she traveled through Pennsylvania, trying to win the crucial battleground state.
Here in Pennsylvania right now, each of us has an opportunity to make a difference. Because in this moment, we do face a real question. What kind of country do we want to live in?
The new surveys show a tight race with both candidates neck and neck. In one poll, Kamala Harris is leading Donald Trump by 50% to 49%. In another, she's leading by 51% to Trump's 47%. But both are within the margin of error. And the Democrats know this, so they brought out the big guns this weekend.
It's impossible not to feel the energy in this room, the positivity, the community, the humanity. We are at the precipice of an incredible shift, the brink of history.
So I hope you'll forgive me if I'm a little frustrated that some of us are choosing to ignore Donald Trump's gross incompetence while asking Kamala to dazzle us at every turn. I hope.
With just 8 days to go, candidates are ramping up their campaign blitz. 41 million Americans have already cast their ballot in what's turning out to be one of America's tightest elections in decades.
Now let's take a look at a different election, the one that just took place in Japan. Japan got a new prime minister this month. His name is Shigeru Ishiba. He took charge on the 1st of October, but he wasn't elected by the public. He won support from within his own party, the ruling party of Japan called LDP, or the Liberal Democratic Party, LDP. They elected him to be prime minister, but that wasn't enough for Ishiba. He wanted a public mandate as well, so he moved fast. Ishiba became party leader on September 27th. He was sworn in as prime minister on October 1st. On the 8th of October, he dissolved Japan's parliament. A week later, on October 15th, he announced elections for October 27th. That was the election date, October 27. So Japanese voters had some 12 days to get ready and vote. Compare that to the endless theatrics in the US. It makes Japan seem far more practical. But despite his unhesitant actions, Ishiba was taking a gamble. Holding snap elections had the potential to backfire, and they did. Japan's ruling party has lost its parliamentary majority. Let's show you the results. Japan has 465 parliamentary seats. The ruling party, the LDP, got 191 seats, down from 259. Before this election, the LDP alone held a majority. Now it doesn't even command half the House alongside its coalition partner. Japan's ruling coalition now has 215 seats, which is less than the halfway mark of 233. This means that Japan is heading for political uncertainty.
Our Liberal Democratic Party and the Komeito Party, which together make up the coalition government, have lost so many talented people, and it is very regrettable. The Liberal Democratic Party must take this matter seriously, reflect on it from the bottom of our hearts, and be reborn.
Ishiba's Liberal Democratic Party has ruled Japan almost continuously since 1955. That's when the party was formed. So they've been in power for almost 70 years. The LDP has been ruling uninterrupted since 2012. However, for the last 2 years, it has been struggling because of various scandals. It started back in 2022 with the assassination of former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. Abe was shot dead in July 2022 by a man who held a grudge against a religious institution known as the Unification Church. The assassination horrified the people of Japan. It also highlighted links between the church and Japan's ruling party, LDP. Those ties angered the people of Japan and caused the LDP, the Liberal Democratic Party's popularity to tank. That was the first blow. But an arguably bigger one came the following year. It's known as the slush fund scandal. In late 2023, some LDP lawmakers were caught diverting political donations. They took donations but did not report them, and then diverted this money into private slush funds. The total amount was about $4 million, which is not the biggest corruption scandal in the world by any means, but it infuriated the people of Japan. The Prime Minister at the time, Fumio Kishida, bore the brunt of public anger. His approval ratings hit 23% in December 2023 and kept falling after that. That is why he decided to step down as party leader this year. And it is how Shigeru Ishiba took over as prime minister. Ishiba came in as a fresh face. He was supposed to help the people of Japan forget their anger, but he called the snap polls before the people got the chance to see him in action. And he made another mistake. He secretly kept funding politicians tainted by the slush fund scandal. This might have been his undoing. Ishiba and the LDP had officially distanced themselves from the corrupt lawmakers. The lawmakers were not endorsed by the party during the snap election, but they were allowed to contest as independents. And that should have been that. But last week, news broke that the LDP was secretly funding these tainted candidates. They were given 20 million yen to campaign. And this is Japanese taxpayer money, by the way. It comes up to about $130,000. This money was given to party branches that were run by the tainted candidates. And the same amount was also given to candidates who were endorsed by the party. So basically, the LDP was still funding corrupt lawmakers while pretending to distance themselves in public. This outraged the Japanese public further, that too on the eve of elections. The result reflects this anger.
It thought that Liberal Democratic Party will lose seats, though I didn't expect them to lose that many. I guess they were knocked out by that transfer of 20 million yen.
I think this is a natural result, because even though it is a hidden fund, it is still taxpayer money, and how we use that taxpayer money is very important to us.
So what happens next? Well, Japan is holding a special parliamentary session on the 11th of November. That is when they will choose their new prime minister. The LDP is still the biggest party in parliament, but their coalition is 18 seats shy of the halfway mark. So they could choose to add another party to their coalition. Ishiba has ruled that out for now, but he may still get outside support from some of the other parties. It's unlikely that Japan's opposition parties can oust the LDP, not unless all of them come together, which is a long shot. So for now, the LDP may continue to rule. But Ishiba may or may not be in charge. He is the one who led his party to this debacle. So he may have to take responsibility and step aside. We'll know for sure in the next 2 weeks, but one thing is already certain: Japan is looking at chaos in the near future. Now let's talk about the war in Ukraine. As the US election draws closer, Zelensky is making frantic appeals, but they're getting drowned out by the conflict in West Asia. Zelensky wants the West to support his victory plan. He wants them to push Russia towards a truce, but on his terms. The problem is he hasn't found takers for this. So the Ukrainian president is shifting his focus to the global south, specifically to India. He believes that India can play a role in the negotiations. According to Zelensky, Prime Minister Modi can influence the course of this war. But will Russia agree to a negotiated truce now, at a time when Russian forces are gearing up to escalate and North Korean soldiers have arrived to fight with them? Here's a report.
These are North Korean soldiers. Most of these men appear young, somewhere in their 20s. Perhaps even younger. They've never traveled outside their country, but now they're on Russian soil.
I can confirm that North Korean troops have been sent to Russia and that North Korean military units have been deployed to the Kursk region.
Soon, these troops will be dispatched to the front lines. Their mission is to fight the Ukrainian forces. Last week, the Russian president was asked about this, but as always, Putin kept his cards close to his chest.
Images are a serious thing. If there are images, then they reflect something. We are in touch with our North Korean friends, and we will see how this process develops.
The entry of North Korean troops adds a new dimension to this conflict. This isn't the first time Pyongyang has helped Moscow out. At the beginning of the conflict, North Korea supplied Russia with bombs. But now, Kim Jong-un is supplying soldiers to the Russian forces. It's a much bigger escalation. And Zelensky himself has termed it a serious challenge.
In particular, we have information that 2 units of military personnel from North Korea are being trained, potentially even 2 brigades of 6,000 people each. And this is a challenge.
How will Zelensky respond? Well, his options remain limited. For months now, Ukraine has pushed the West for more lethal firepower. This includes a request to lift restrictions on long-range attacks. But so far, the US and its NATO allies have been non-committal. Instead, they continue to issue verbal warnings.
Let's be clear. If North Korean soldiers do enter into combat, this development would demonstrate Russia's growing desperation in its war against Ukraine.
But more rhetoric won't help Ukraine. Zelensky perhaps realizes this himself. He's looking for tangible assistance, and he's reaching out to the global south again. Zelensky has made a fresh appeal to the Indian Prime Minister. He says that Prime Minister Modi could mediate between Ukraine and Russia. He's even willing to let India host the next peace summit. But his appeal may not be well received in New Delhi because it comes with a rant against India's time-tested friendship with Russia. Zelensky says that India should act against Russia. It should block the Russian economy and halt purchases of cheap energy, and extend more support to bring back Ukrainian children from Russia. If Zelensky's goal is to win India over, statements like this may work against him. Diplomacy doesn't work through ultimatums, especially if you're on the back foot.
Now let's turn our attention to Pakistan. India's broke neighbor is staying true to form. Once again, Islamabad is on the hunt for loans. It has been knocking on a number of doors. The International Monetary Fund, the Asian Development Bank, the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, the Islamic Trade Finance Corporation. Everywhere you look, Pakistan's finance minister is trying to strike some sort of deal. But the biggest fish he's after is Pakistan's go-to piggy bank, China. China recently deferred some of Pakistan's loan repayments, but Islamabad isn't done yet. It wants an additional $1.4 billion in loan from Beijing and even more debt rolled over. Here's our report.
Pakistan's finance minister Mohammad Aurangzeb has had a busy week. He was in Washington, D.C. for the annual meetings of the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank Group. Islamabad secured a $7 billion IMF loan just last month. The fund also released about $1.1 billion as the first tranche of the loan. So, of course, Aurangzeb had to attend the annual meeting. He had to provide updates about how that money was being used. Now, the IMF World Bank annual meeting is like a gala for the financing world. The who's who of financial organizations drop in to visit. So, for Aurangzeb and Pakistan, that meant more potential lenders. Pakistan is in deep debt. It owes money to the IMF and other institutional lenders like the Islamic Development Bank. It owes money to commercial banks, to bilateral lenders like Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and of course China. But despite this, Islamabad still doesn't have its house in order. It's still looking for more loans. And when you go through Aurangzeb's itinerary, it shows that he's been knocking on every single door. He met the Saudi Arabian finance minister, the Turkish finance minister, the Emirati finance minister, China's vice minister of finance, and even the British minister for development. He also met with the representatives of a number of institutions, the Islamic Development Bank, the Dubai Islamic Bank, the Mashrek Bank, JP Morgan. You name the institution and Aurangzeb was there. It seems most of these places weren't too interested in any fresh loan pitch. So Aurangzeb thanked them and moved on to the next mark. But once in a while, he struck gold. The Islamic Trade Financing Corporation has agreed to give Pakistan $3 billion over the next 3 years. About $269 million will be provided immediately. Then the Asian Development Bank has agreed to consider a $500 million loan. It's officially to support environmental protection in Pakistan. But let's face it, Islamabad might just use that money to address other financial concerns. The ADB is expected to take a decision on the loan tomorrow. It's not final yet, but Aurangzeb is already thanking them in anticipation. He also tried his climate cash scheme on the IMF. The IMF has already agreed to give Pakistan $7 billion. But Aurangzeb wants another billion from the IMF's Resilience and Sustainability Trust. Again, officially, this will be to help Pakistan mitigate climate risks. Let's see if the IMF bites. Now, as you can see, Pakistan's finance minister had quite the week. But he saved the best for last. This weekend, Aurangzeb presented his new plan to get more money from China. China is already Pakistan's largest bilateral lender. Beijing has lent billions to Islamabad, far more than it can afford to pay back. So how does Pakistan plan to deal with this? By taking even more money from China. Yes, Pakistan has asked for an additional $1.4 billion from China. China hasn't agreed to this yet, and it has rejected similar proposals in the past. But that hasn't stopped Pakistan from trying. It's actually targeting China with several other schemes as well, from another debt rollover to a new financing scheme. Pakistan plans to launch bonds in China's currency, the yuan. These will be issued to Chinese customers. All this goes to show that nothing has changed for Pakistan. After all that recent talk of better financial management, Islamabad is still hooked on loans. No matter how much China or the IMF pour in, it won't be enough to bring Pakistan out of the hole it has dug itself into.
It's been almost 3 months since the so-called Dhaka Spring, since the promises of a new Bangladesh. But this new Bangladesh is looking a lot like old East Pakistan. Sheikh Hasina's aides are on trial, Hindus are being targeted, they're being fired from their jobs, and they're marching on the streets for justice. What is Mohammad Yunus doing about all of this? Well, he's busy defending it. Yunus has said that these are not anti-Hindu attacks. These are anti-Hasina attacks. He says Hindus supported the previous regime of Sheikh Hasina, hence they're being targeted. And he is using the same logic against India. Sheikh Hasina's aides are set to appear in court next month. Hasina herself will be called up soon. When that happens, will Mohammad Yunus pick a fight with India, or will he show some maturity? Our next report tells you.
This was Chittagong on Friday. A sea of Hindu people swamped the streets in protest. Their demand? Equal rights, to not be treated as second-class citizens. Hindus make up about 8% of Bangladesh's population. Under Sheikh Hasina, they prospered. She kept the radical Islamists at bay. But now, there's a target on their back. Local reports say direct attacks have subsided. Now, the tactics have changed. Hindus are being pressured to resign from their jobs, like Rontu Das, an assistant professor at Chittagong University. Radicals issued death threats to him, so Das has decided to step down. It's the same with police trainees. 252 sub-inspectors have been dismissed by the Yunus regime. Around 91 of them are Hindu. Many of them have alleged discrimination. Since the government isn't listening, they have hit the streets. The Hindu groups have 8 demands. Among them is setting up a Ministry of Minority Affairs, enacting a Minority Protection Act, and declaring public holidays on Hindu festivals. But Yunus is unlikely to accept these demands. He doesn't see these attacks as religious. He sees them as political revenge.
When you say minority community is being attacked, that minority community, particularly Hindu community, was associated with Sheikh Hasina. So you cannot distinguish whether they were attacked because they are followers of Sheikh Hasina or they were attacked because they are Hindu.
The root cause is an obsession with the past. Radical elements are keen on erasing Bangladesh's liberation history. Sheikh Hasina used to crack down on them, so now they want revenge. And Yunus is playing along. Dhaka's International Crimes Tribunal is probing Hasina's regime. 10 of her ministers have been asked to appear by November 18th. Their charges? Crimes against humanity and genocide. Hasina too is on the tribunal's radar. She has been asked to appear next month. Of course, Hasina isn't in Bangladesh. She's staying in New Delhi under India's protection. Chances are that this will trigger a standoff. Yunus's ministers have already dropped hints. They have promised a strong protest if India does not extradite her. And Yunus isn't done yet. He visited Hasina's former residence today, the same one that was stormed by student protesters in August. The place is almost in ruins now. Abusive graffiti on the walls, bedrooms ransacked, and valuables stolen. Yunus wants to turn this building into a memorial, a reminder of Hasina's downfall. What drives this obsession with the past? This need to erase Hasina's legacy? Perhaps some old wounds? Hasina was no fan of Mohammad Yunus. She accused him of sucking blood from the poor. She even charged him in more than 100 corruption cases. As a result, Yunus couldn't return to Bangladesh, not until Hasina had been toppled. Could those bitter memories be driving Yunus now? It's impossible to say, but one thing is clear. Yunus's actions are endangering a lot. Bangladesh's long-standing ties with India, its hard-fought secular identity, and the trust of its Hindu minority.
Our next story is set in Georgia. It's a Black Sea nation straddling West Asia and Eastern Europe, and it is at a crossroads. On Saturday, the country went to polls. It was called Georgia's most crucial election since the country's independence. It was less about choosing parties and more about choosing between the West and Russia. Most exit polls showed a close election. In the end, Georgia's ruling party won the election with 54% of the votes. The president has now accused Russia of meddling. She says Moscow orchestrated an election fraud. So were Georgia's elections rigged? And what does it mean for the country's future? Here's a report.
This is Georgia, a South Caucasus nation bordering Russia. In 1991, it gained independence when the Soviet Union fell. Since then, it's been a battleground of conflicting interests between the West and Russia. For the last 3 decades, Georgia has been pro-West. It even fought a war with Moscow in 2008. 80% of its people want to join the European Union. Which brings us to the ruling party, the Georgian Dream. It's owned by billionaire Bidzina Ivanishvili. In 2014, it got its first stint in power, and it was seen as a pro-European party. During the first term, it enjoyed close relations with Brussels. But things changed in recent years. Ivanishvili's businesses were in Russia. It's where he made his money. And the party's tilt slowly became visible. In 2022, when Russia invaded Ukraine, Georgia's government did not support the Western sanctions. It also promoted deeper relations with Russia. What about Georgia's opposition? The biggest opposition party is the United National Movement, or UNM. It was founded by Mikhail Saakashvili. He's a former president who's currently in prison. The opposition calls this arrest politically motivated. Exit polls conducted by Western pollsters predicted a close election, but the result was very different. Not only did the Georgian Dream win, it did so by securing 54% of the total votes. The UNM only managed to get around 10% of the votes. Even with all the opposition groups coming together, they won only 37% of the total votes. This hasn't gone down well with the country's pro-Western president or the opposition groups. Georgia's president says she does not recognize the results and has accused Russia of a special operation.
As the last independent institution in this country, I must clearly state that I do not recognize these elections. Recognizing them would be tantamount to legitimizing Russia's takeover of Georgia.
Observers from the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe say that there was evidence of democratic backsliding. Meanwhile, Europe wants a probe into these elections and says there have been irregularities.
Here we have made it clear that the EU expects the Georgian Central Election Commission and other relevant authorities to fulfill their duties, to swiftly, transparently and independently investigate and adjudicate electoral irregularities and allegations thereof. Those irregularities must be clarified and addressed.
Meanwhile, the Kremlin has rejected all accusations of election interference. Moscow says there was no intervention from its side and has instead accused Europe of trying to influence the outcome of the polls. Georgia's opposition has now called for mass protests. It won't be the first in the country. Georgia was rocked by mass protests earlier this year over a controversial foreign agents bill. This election puts the country at a crossroads again. For long, it has deepened its relationship with the West due to the unpopular Soviet sentiment in the country. But the recent tilt towards Russia indicates that Georgia may be in Moscow's orbit again.
Play a game on your phone and there's a sports betting ad. Listen to a podcast and there is another one there. Open social media and you'll find celebrities talking about betting wins. Gambling has reached new levels worldwide, and so has the threat it poses to global health. A new report is out. It says 450 million people have been harmed by gambling the world over. 450 million people. They've been harmed from the risk of financial ruin to family breakdown, increased risk of suicide, domestic violence, and loss of employment. Whether personally, professionally, physically, or mentally, 450 million people face some kind of negative consequence because of gambling. And out of this, at least 80 million people face severe consequences. They suffer from what's being called gambling disorder. This is a mental health condition. It involves compulsive gambling for the rare high from wins, denial that there is a problem, and the inability to call it quits. Gambling addiction is a lot like substance addiction. It is a vicious cycle. It is difficult to break, despite the losses, despite the guilt. And today, millions are going through this, both young and old. About 16% adults and 26% adolescents who gamble suffer from this disorder. This is a sign of our times. It has become easier than ever to slip into gambling addiction. The industry is expanding rapidly. You don't need a lottery ticket anymore. You can access a casino 24 hours a day thanks to that mobile phone in your pocket. And this is the result. Online casino and online sports betting are the most rapidly expanding areas for gambling globally. As the internet reach widens, so does the reach of the gambling industry, which has an ace up its sleeve: marketing. Incisive and sophisticated marketing with a barrage of ads, gambling is a booming market. It is worth about $774 billion. It is expected to reach $1 trillion by 2030, mostly thanks to online gambling. It is expected to have about 300 million users by the end of this decade. So this is a difficult battle, especially for countries like India, where gambling is complex and controversial. India has varying laws in different states, most of which prohibit gambling, with some exceptions like lottery and horse racing. Goa, Daman, and Sikkim allow casinos. Meanwhile, online gambling is a legal grey area. No national law prohibits it, but it is banned in Andhra Pradesh and Tamil Nadu. Despite the prohibitions, illegal gambling is reportedly widespread in the country. It is estimated to be a $60 billion market. And its online market is said to have more than 12 million users. What about other nations? Japan, Qatar, Poland, and several others ban gambling. In countries like the UK and Australia, gambling is legal. Meanwhile, some countries have had a change of heart. France, for instance, is thinking about legalizing online casinos. Last year, Brazil legalized them. And in 2018, the US overturned a ban on sports betting. Since then, most states have permitted gambling, making the US one of the biggest gambling markets in the world, worth about $67 billion. So this is the gist of it. Countries do not know how to deal with gambling. Some are betting on it for tax revenue and legalizing gambling. Others want to ban it. But their execution fails on the ground. Countries do not know what is right. But one thing is clear, legal or not, the world needs stronger regulation to curb the impact of commercial gambling. Else, we are gambling with public health. Missiles are dropping fast in West Asia, but not as fast as memes. I'm guessing social media was bracing for Israel's attack on Iran because the jokes came immediately. From stocks to bitcoins to interest rates, most of them focused on the financial side of things. Plus, this is Diwali season in India, a festival where people fire rockets into the air. Not the Israeli kind, of course. These are firecrackers. So put together, they made for some funny memes. Take a look at this. And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. In Russia, Kalidasa's Shakuntalam was performed at the Olonko Theatre in Yakutsk. Thailand's king marks his 72nd birthday with a ceremonial royal barge procession. And the Day of the Dead comes alive in Mexico as people parade around in skeleton costumes. Finally, we're taking you back in history. On this day in 1886, the Statue of Liberty was officially dedicated to America. It was a gift from France to the United States. The dismantled statue arrived in New York, enclosed in over 200 packing cases. It was then reassembled in the New York harbor. We're leaving you on that note. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
From impeachments to inaugurations, if it's a political story, we are on the scene. The race for the White House is heating up.
Kamala, you're fired.
I say, bring it on.
If it's breaking news, we're live with the latest coverage. From the White House, the State Department, and Capitol Hill. We know the issues, but above all, we know the players to bring you the latest in-depth analysis on all the key stories that we're covering. I'm Eric Ham. Join me from Washington here on Firstpost America.